We're thankful to have you tonight. We're thankful that you're here tonight. We've offered this as a behind-the-scenes look into just the work that Just Hope International has been doing and is planning moving forward. For those of you interested in what happened to the 90,000 pineapples, Mr. Philip Crockett, our Director of Projects, will be happy to field your questions after the event. He's in the middle of that right now as we speak. We will cover that later on in a subsequent event this year. Tonight is a behind-the-scenes look into our work. We are thankful to have Peter Miller with us. So I just want to introduce a couple of folks. Everyone, say hello to Karen Bruton, the founder and CEO. We have other staff here that have asked us not to mention their name, so we'll honor that and move right into the presentation here. My name is Ben Turner. I serve as president of Just Hope. Peter Miller has been working with us for really a little over a year and a half now. He started first in a contractor role with us, doing an assessment in West Africa on the ground. He is a Wheaton grad. 4 years ago, you said, today? Mm-hmm. And has spent considerable amount of time since his graduation on the ground, in the field, as you say, in West Africa. We are tickled to have him as a part of the team. But he currently serves full-time in the country of Ghana and is home in the U.S. He's visiting family and friends outside of Chicago, and we are thankful to have him in Middle Tennessee this week, which is why we wanted to schedule this event. Our heart behind this is that we would offer to Just Hope supporters, prospective supporters, folks who are just now learning about the organization, some feedback as to what is going on from a person you would most like to hear from, who is there day in and day out working with the people we are so privileged to serve. So tonight we will cover that. Peter and I are going to go into a bit of a question and answer format. And so what I'd like to encourage you to do, if there's a topic that you have a question about, please feel free to just raise your hand or just go ahead and ask the question instead of maybe holding that until the end. But this is going to be more of a conversational format up here, where I'm going to try and lead Peter through a discussion about his unique perspective there full time. So Peter Miller, and we're delighted that you're here in town and happy to have this opportunity. One of the things that would be helpful is to have folks understand. I think someone said on our team here recently, we spend so much time working day in and day out that we know where we are in the world, we know the work that's going on, but it would be helpful to sort of provide the context for folks. Where is it exactly that we're working? What are some of those conditions? So if you would, lead us down that road a bit.
Yeah. So just, first of all, thank you all for coming here, taking time out of your day just to be able to share in this event with us. So where we're working right now is Ghana. So it's in West Africa. It's about, as far as area, it's probably about twice the size, a little more than twice the size of Tennessee. So not a huge country, but it has about 25 million people, roughly. And the official language is English, which helps a lot for me. But at the same time, there are dozens of local dialects and languages as you get into more rural areas. Working with farmers, serving the poor, you encounter more people who aren't necessarily fluent. But English is sort of the working language. So you can see it's right on the southern, on the west coast of Africa, right on the southern coast there. It has a lot of nice beach. It has sort of a tropical rainforest belt to the south. And then as you head farther north, it becomes a little more arid, a little drier, a little tougher conditions, I guess. So the weather in some ways is similar to Tennessee right now, but sort of year-round, this kind of weather. And then you have a rainy season and a dry season. So this picture gives a little glimpse of where we're setting up in Ghana. Our program is focused on serving smallholder farmers, and we work to do some training with them to build their capacities, their organizational skills, their financial skills, their organizational, financial, and agriculture skills. And kind of one of the goals is how do we look at farming as a business? So in Africa a lot, in Ghana, a lot of people have a really bad perception of farming. They see it as something that their grandparents did and they aren't really interested anymore. They don't see it as a viable occupation, but we really believe that agribusiness farming, that it has potential to raise farmers out of poverty where they aren't stuck in the cycle of hoping that they just make it through the year with enough food. And sort of the place where we've chosen to start working is near a small town called Nsuam, which is right outside, maybe 20 or 30 miles outside of Accra, which is the capital. So Accra is a city of maybe 3 or 4 million. So it's somewhat a modern African city. But where we're working is just outside of that. And it's interesting, it's sort of at crossroads. So you have a lot of rural influences, but also some urban influences. So a lot of market opportunities, but also challenges where land pressures create challenges. So this picture sort of captures it. It shows you have sort of this beautiful view, and then you have behind us is sort of like open, unused land, but it's slowly being taken over, commercialized for real estate. And you can see some construction is going there, and you can see the city in the distance. But a lot of farmers are kind of caught in this position between modernization and also like the traditional livelihoods. And a lot of sort of the average income people probably live off of maybe around $4 to $5 a day would be the average, with farmers earning considerably less typically. So our goal is focusing. On the left of the picture, you can see a lady, Margaret, who is just one of the farmers that we met. And so I think this picture kind of represents a little bit about her. You can see behind she has some corn, which is one of the staples. And that's sort of what she's counting on to feed her family, feed her kids throughout the entire year until the next harvest. And if she needs some money to buy any other goods, she takes some corn to the market and sells it. She eats a lot of it. Her husband left her a few years ago, and it's just her and her kids. The person on the right is just a friend. But that just gives you a little glimpse to her life. And sort of just a little background about farmers, sort of like the typical day would be, she would probably get up at 4:30, do some like household chores, sweep around the house. Ghanaians are incredibly clean about sweeping the house, sweeping outside the house. She, maybe heat up some water to use throughout the day, get some water. And then she would head off to her farm. Her farm is probably an hour and a half, 2 hours walk away from where she is. And she'll spend the day at the farm. She'll work there until maybe 12, take a little break in the afternoon when it's hot, and then maybe work in the evening or come back. Once a week, she'll probably go to the market, get anything she needs. But it's sort of a very simple, it's a very simple life in a sense. But she works incredibly hard. The farmers there, we view them as sort of our customers to serve. And we have a lot of respect for how hard they work. To the right, you can see some bricks that are left over from house construction, or she's saving to build onto her house. But the people there live fairly simply.
You've talked about their conditions, and so there's the conditions, and then there's the mentality. The conditions, I've heard you say before, everything's so unpredictable. Mm-hmm. And any one of us could make the case that life is unpredictable no matter where mm-hmm. you live. What makes the unpredictability of Margaret's situation different than us waking up every day not knowing what the day holds per se?
So I think one of the differences is that for like Margaret and farmers like her, they just like operate on a day-to-day basis, living on the margins. And sort of the difference between being able to eat or not being able to eat, or being able to send your kids to school or not being able to send them, it's rather slim. So when there's like a shock, when there's some bad event that happens in the family, in the community, it can be really difficult. So there's a lot of unpredictability. And so this is actually her house. So you can see it. She has cement walls, which is really nice. She has a porch, which is actually nice. And a tin roof, which is a little dated, but it probably keeps the water out for the most part. So in some ways, she's been able to take some of those basic steps Some of the farmers we work with just have thatch roofs. They just have mud houses. But Margaret's been able to be a little bit above that, and some of that's probably her proximity to the city, where things like metal roofs are a little more accessible, a little easier for her to access and afford.
What do you say to people that would look at that situation and say, well, you know, I've heard it said before, well, why doesn't she just pull herself up? Why doesn't she just, you know, people will say, well, I don't understand why they don't just, you know, why people there just don't, you know, make a go of it. You know, part of what we talked about is we recognize the limitations. You've talked about markets, you've talked about different things that are just really limiting factors that I think for people to understand that there's no critical mass or there's no basis to begin with.
Yeah. So there's definitely no easy answer for why poverty persists anywhere in the world. It's really complex. Some of it is that social, sort of the social conditions where you do have land issues, where for Margaret, you know, it's 2 hours walking to her land. She doesn't have, she's the head of the household, so she's in charge of kind of the labor and taking care of her kids and providing. So for her, some of it's a social constraint, where she's sort of limited by her family situation, the social conditions. Some of it's land access, where it is difficult for her to have land access. So she spends, you know, some of you may have a bad commute here in Nashville, and she has a really bad commute where she has to walk and then work all day, rest a little bit, work a little bit more, and walk back. So some of it is land access, is a big challenge.
This would be a market. This would be a typical West African market.
Yeah, so this is a typical West African market, and you can see typically you'll have kind of local agriculture produce, and then you'll have really small, really cheap kind of imports, like maybe some like plastic bowls, a few like gadgets. You see some salt, probably some sugar there, some soap. So everything it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. The purchasing power of consumers is pretty low, but it's changing. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth, a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurship. Go ahead.
Well, I think as we've talked about this, and you and I, we've agreed it's easy to stop and you look at a situation and say, well, it looks and it sounds pretty pitiful. Mm-hmm. But our belief system as an organization, as individuals, is that it's the circumstances themselves that people find for their life that is what is so challenging. And any one of us in this room that have ever traveled or worked, interacted with folks that live in these conditions, what we realize is they're really remarkable, incredible people. Mm-hmm. And what they're able to accomplish in these circumstances, it's mind-boggling at times. And so what I wanted Peter to do tonight is talk a little bit about this. You use this word, you know, we use words like resilient. You've talked about, you've used a phrase, reckless resilience. So let's move past the conditions, which help us have a context and help us really understand the weight of the circumstances, but talk about a bright light shining in the midst of that, and that's the people and their spirit.
Yeah. So I think thinking about the resilience it's incredible how just the human spirit, the ability to survive in conditions that you wouldn't think. And sort of, I guess one person I can maybe talk about is a guy named Kofi, who he doesn't work with us, but he has his own agriculture kind of project center that he does over there, and we've done some work with him. But when he was a boy, he came home from school one day. He just lived with his mom, and he saw her in tears, and she was working to put out a fire. Her entire cocoa plantation had burned, or the couple acres that she had. And in his words, like the next couple years were really, really difficult. And that's sort of an understatement. So he's sort of dedicated his life to looking for agriculture solutions beyond just slash and burn, beyond sort of the traditional ways that have a lot of adverse externalities that can really negatively impact people. So people like him seeing sort of the conditions that they overcome. At the same time, people are just incredibly resourceful in sort of a incredible, surprising way. I've seen tractors that run without a wheel. I've seen road graders run without a wheel. I've seen cows on the back of motorcycles being transported. People find a way to like get things done, and it's not always the most efficient. It's definitely not always what I would have thought about, and sometimes it's better. But people are really resilient. They find a way to survive. They find a way to get by and to make it through tomorrow.
Sometimes they do it. I think about this picture. We selected it for the wall over here. This young lady was at the project site selling food, and this is an entrepreneur. This is somebody who knows that there are workers nearby and that they'll have to eat lunch. So she's there to serve them a meal. She's brought everything in that bowl. She stepped out. She's taken a risk. Even to learn that later, because of some of that risk and some disagreement at home, she would later, take a pretty good beating, enough to cause her to hit the road and find another place to stay. So I've heard you talk about survival. There's a lot of investment going on in the world. There's a lot of service going on in the world. So much of our focus, though, is at that survival level. And you talk about Kofi coming home and the cocoa farm is burned. And as we've talked about this, there are people in this room who directly or indirectly have experienced loss at the drop of a hat. Something has happened in life and it's devastating. What's the difference for someone in Kofi's position or some of these folks that you work with day in and day out? When they experience that, they have a strong sense of community, but that recovery is not, in some ways it's the same. What would be the key differences?
So one of just like kind of the main focus of what we do is we want to encourage better just resource management. We want to work with farmers for what they have currently to help them start managing it better. So one of those ways is, you may have heard or seen on the website, we're using VSLAs, which are like community savings groups where people come together in groups. They're able to buy shares, buy membership into these groups, and it gives them access to savings instruments, also access to loans within their groups. But it also does some other things like provide some micro levels of insurance. But sort of the key beyond like just providing like those financial services where they actually are providing them themselves is for the people we're working with to recognize that they aren't dependent on others to come in and give them a loan. They can start with what they have available and work from there and grow. I met an entrepreneur named Senyo over in Ghana a couple years ago. And I remember just hearing his story, and he said to me, I really believe that anything that a rich man can do, a poor man can do. It just takes longer. So a lot of what we're trying to do is meet people with where they are, not with where we want them to be, but start with where they are and allow them to take those steps forward where they are able to cope better with shocks, where they're able to diversify and not have the risk that they would have normally, and be able to take on the unpredictability that exists in life, regardless of where you are, but sort of especially in West Africa for rural farmers, and be able to better manage that.
I want to get into some specifics of what you and your team go through in terms of your work and your effort. Would you just kind of do a running commentary on what you see, this continuing the thought about the entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah.
And you've written recently about entrepreneurship out of necessity versus out of opportunity. So if you could talk a little bit about that, the differences that you see. So much of this is entrepreneurship out of necessity. Oftentimes entrepreneurship in the U.S. is out of necessity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of investment opportunities, but there's also a lot of successful people that said, I started a business because I had a wife and 3 children and a mortgage, and I had to do something, or I was 30 days from going under, or whatever the case may be. But as you look through some of these pictures and sort of that entrepreneurial spirit, what do you see? And then we'll get into some specifics of your team.
So sort of the mission of the program we're doing in Ghana right now is to empower smallholder farmers and also entrepreneurs to better manage their resources. And so if you look at West Africa, if you look at Africa, the number of entrepreneurs is way more than kind of the rest of the world as far as percentage. I think Ghana is like maybe 25% of the adult population is considered to be entrepreneurs, meaning that they are self-employed and they've recently started a business within 3.5 years. So a lot of that is entrepreneurs who are choosing to start a business, choosing to take a risk out of necessity, out of a lack of other opportunities. So they're sort of driven to be entrepreneurial, to take risk based on their lack of other alternatives. And if you look at sort of the economic growth, there tends to be a strong correlation between economic growth, income growth in countries, and entrepreneurial activity. But Africa doesn't, and like Ghana, the growth doesn't necessarily line up with that when you see how much entrepreneurial activity it is. And that's because you have the entrepreneurial activity out of necessity. And it tends to be really low margins that people are operating under, and there seems to not be a lot of innovation, not a lot of variety. Whereas if you have entrepreneurs who see opportunities for better efficiencies, opportunities for innovations, when you have that kind of entrepreneurship, you tend to see more economic growth, tend to see growth in incomes. So our goal is to be able to train farmers and also agribusiness entrepreneurs to better manage their resources. So looking at the entrepreneurs, we want to see them, how do they take those skills of being a farmer, of taking risks, sort of having those entrepreneurial behaviors, and how do you transfer that from entrepreneurs from necessity to entrepreneurs to opportunity. And if you're able to do that, if you're able to like build the skill sets that allow them to make that jump, to make better management decisions, you're able to see improved incomes and increased, just better, stronger communities.
Our mission as an organization is to make an impact that lasts, and we believe there are a lot of ways to do that, but we believe our calling and our role is to do that through what we think is the best chance at making a lasting impact, and that's economic empowerment. So for us, it's meeting people where they are, figuring out what it is that motivates them, what are they interested in, and how can we come alongside them in that effort. If you would, Peter, part of, we talked today about an entrepreneurial effort going and building any organization comes with the blessings of serving customers, but also the blessings of building a team and seeing that team serve with excellence. So before we get into your week in and week out, sort of your process, some of the challenges of working on the ground there, talk to us a little bit about the team you're assembling, who they are, what they bring to the table, a little bit about their background. Who are these folks?
Yeah. So sort of the first component of the work we're trying to do is that capacity building, that training with farmers and farmer groups. So these three guys we've hired to go out and to train farmers, to find groups and work with them and be able to improve their own capacities. So on the left is Joseph. He started working for us about 2 weeks ago. He's a recent graduate of Legon University, and he just spent a year doing the National Service, which is sort of a program, like a forced Peace Corps program in Ghana, where he was working with an agriculture program during his national service. And so he just joined our team and is really excited to work with us, to be able to go out, work with farmers, work with farmer groups. The second guy is Joshua Fiegbeji. He's the first guy that we hired when we went to Ghana. And Joshua he really represents what I really enjoy about kind of the work, and that's just like the quality of people I get to meet. I remember stopping by Joshua's house, and there would be this guy, Ibrahim, who was just kind of always there, always kind of around. And he would go and climb the coconut tree and get us like coconuts when we were there, but he was always just kind of there. And I asked Joshua about Ibrahim, and what did he do? And Joshua said that he just saw him sleeping on the side of the road a couple nights and invited him to stay in like an extra room in his house. So that's just like the kind of guy who Joshua is, and he has a background in marketing. In business, he has a lot of experience setting up the VSLAs, the community savings groups. And he's someone who really prioritizes people. And that's really where we have an impact, is in the people we invest in, whether it's the farming groups, whether it's a neighbor who needs a place to live. Just to be able to like work with people like that, it's encouraging for me and really, really rewarding. The third guy is Collins Owusu Pippin, and he joined our staff. He had just graduated with a master's in agriculture engineering, had studied irrigation, and really has a passion to see agriculture transform Ghana and really be elevated to the status that it's worthy of. I may have mentioned that agriculture doesn't have that like a positive connotation over there. And people like Joshua, they see opportunity there. They're willing to get their hands dirty. And so right now he's working with farmers, working to recruit farmer groups to kind of join the program and working to train them. In the back, so this is a picture.
Sorry.
So in the back we have a second thing besides the capacity building and training is we have a small innovation hub where we just want to test out the innovations that and sort of learn how the farmers really are surviving. So you can see a few different crop varieties being tested. We're using conservation agriculture principles. We use mulch to protect the soil, to better use the water so you have more efficient water use, and to hopefully be able to build the ability of the soil to retain nutrients to be able to feed the plants and have a healthy yield. So those three guys, really those are the guys on the ground who are working, who are out there hustling every day. And sort of every day is different. There's not really sort of a normal day, but most days they'll go out into sort of the area where we're working. And right now we're working to recruit and engage farming groups. So that involves going into a community, and the first thing they do is they'll talk to what we call the opinion leader. They'll talk to either the local chief, they'll talk to a school teacher, someone who's influential, someone who is able to kind of speak on behalf, or someone who's well respected in the community. And so they introduce Just Hope, they introduce themselves, and they get to know a little bit about the community. And they share how we are interested in helping, working with farmers. We aren't there to give handouts. One of the big challenges we face is there's a lot of, there can be donor fatigue where like a lot of NGOs, a lot of government organizations have shown up, they've just given fertilizers. So a lot of groups have sort of developed the skill of like getting free stuff, kind of like a college student here who's just really good at finding free food or whatever they can get. So we have to, it takes time to develop the trust. It takes time to get to know those groups, but it starts by meeting with the opinion leader. And then usually we'll set up an appointment to follow up and meet with a group of farmers or meet with some community members and share more about Just Hope, and also learn about how they live, what their challenges are. So really like the first step in introducing ourselves is to like listen and to hear where they are and how they live. And so after that we would...
Anybody in the room ever sold anything? It's like a sales process with a twist, you know, and I think one of the things that is helpful is for people to understand some of the trust factors that you run into, because you have had these folks that are just going and doing the handouts, sort of poisoning the water, if you will. How sophisticated is the effort to have to build the trust? It's almost like there's no formal committee that you're approaching, but there's an informal committee of who's who. There's a gatekeeper, there's a key advisor, you talk through just as these guys are going through all the different dynamics that they're having to do to make this happen, right?
Yeah. And so one of the biggest things we face is just an understanding of what development is. And so you walk in and people are, they find out you're an NGO, you're there for development, and they think you're there to bring things. You're there to bring electricity, to bring water. And those are good things and those are great things. But we, sort of our team on the ground, we view development as helping people to be able to solve their own problems, with their own resources. So we look at it, it's not instantly bringing electricity, although that would be great. Like, we'd love to be able to do that, but we'd rather look to teach the locals of how they can, how they can start to generate, or find, I guess a better example would be like financial services. We aren't there just to give loans, we're there to teach them how to be able to give loans to themselves. And so it's not so much that the loans, yes, that's a byproduct of development, but really development is the people being able to develop the ability, the instinct to solve the problems themselves, to look around and find solutions, and be able to grow from there. And it's really empowering to be able to realize that you're able to provide a service for yourself. You don't have to sit there and wait for someone to come around and hope that they choose you to give it to you. So really, it starts with when we walk in there, there's sort of that disconnect about what is development. And really, we're there to see them achieve their potential. We aren't there to achieve our potential at all. We want to see the communities we work in be great communities, not because Just Hope is there, but because the people there are great people, are hardworking people, are honest people. And that is how we believe that you can have an impact that lasts, as opposed to simply bringing in goods or service, or goods to just hand out.
So in Central,
what kind of meeting are we looking at there?
That's a good question. So this here is, this is an example of our village savings and loan associations. So this is a group in Barakusu. It's the first group we've worked with. And you can see Joshua is sitting there on the left. And then these are the group of farmers. I think there are about roughly 9 men and 9 women, although the numbers, they're still finalizing it. So as the process went, we went in, we talked to community leaders, the opinion leaders, introduced Just Hope, and we were able to set up a meeting with these farmers. And Joshua was able to learn more about what their challenges were, and he was able to talk to them a little bit about VSLAs, how they could come together, how they could save, how they could make loans to one another. And although it starts small, over time, it's able to grow. So you're able to see at the top is the savings box. So right there is a box, and each week they buy their shares, and the shares get locked in the box. The box has 3 different locks that 3 different members of the group each have a key. And so it has built-in sort of transparency and accountability measures that are absolutely necessary within that culture. And so you can see the group sitting. They have a special order that they have sort of the management committee sit, and you can see there's 3 women, 3 men, and they're responsible for sort of running the meeting. They collect the share purchases, they give out the loans, and so they're just going through that process. And so once we get to that point, Joshua works with the group, and initially he's going there every week. But the group, they write their own constitution, they elect their own leaders, it's all group driven. So we're really there as a facilitator. We source the VSLA kit and they purchase it from us. So really it's all about them taking responsibility, them being empowered to solve their own challenges just a little bit at a time.
Peter, why that? What's the advantage of that over just putting your money in a bank?
For us, for them?
For them.
For them, one is it's accessible for small amounts. So some of them don't have the large amounts that they can put in a bank. And for banks, it can be expensive to have, or it can be a hassle, where if you've ever been to a bank in Africa, it's a very slow process, and you can spend a lot longer than their meetings take. So some of it is a time factor. Some of it is an accessibility factor. I've been in really remote areas in Sierra Leone, where you're, at least a dozen miles from a road or a dozen miles from a bank, and I've seen these groups functioning in places where you have to walk or take a motorbike to get to. So these are able to function in areas where it's too expensive for the formal sector to reach right now. So those are a few of the advantages. They also, each member owns a stake in the group, and at the end of a year they get a share out where they get their percentage of the group, they get a cash out. So it allows them then to make a larger purchase of say, like Joshua's worked with groups that have had taxi drivers who can then buy a taxi, or people like to start to build a house, which is typically a slow process over there that takes a lot of years, and they do it as the money comes. But it allows them to be able to save money in a culture where there's often funerals, there's often medical emergency, there's always an emergency, and if you don't have one, a friend has one and needs money. So this provides a way for people to save in a socially appropriate way, and allows them to start to take a step towards being able to get ahead and having a little more security in case there's a fire that wipes out their crops. They also there's a small social fund where they also contribute maybe 10 cents a week to a social fund, and that serves as sort of a microinsurance. But the goal is really, the underlying goal is to like empower the people to realize that they're able to start to solve some of their own issues. And in no way is it like the final solution, but for us, it provides a platform where our goal is to then have maybe 10 or 20 of these groups by the end of the year, with maybe 20 or 30 members each. And then that becomes a network of farmers where we can introduce them to other agribusiness entrepreneurs. We can introduce other innovations that can help improve their lives.
Peter, the natural resources in the area, is it pretty close, clean water? Do they have to do anything for the?
Yeah, so natural resources, they're, in this area they have pretty good rainfall, so that's like a huge plus. There's a river that flows through one of the areas, and that's a huge resource. As far as the climate, it's pretty favorable towards agriculture. The soil is decent. It's not like Illinois or Iowa or some of the soils in the U.S., but you can grow pineapple, you can grow maize, you can get decent yields. So those are a couple. I mean, as far as working with farmers, yes, they have resources, but even the rain, it tends to come all at once. So it doesn't necessarily last. The soils tend to drain really quickly and not have a large water holding capacity. So that can be built up over time by mulching, by increasing the organic content. So the natural resources exist for agriculture. They aren't the best, they aren't the worst, and the goal is to work to improve them, get farmers to appreciate them, and to be able to increase their incomes by using them wisely.
Is the water clean in the river?
Not the river. So you have a lot of the area where there are a lot of communities will have a community water source. So I would say probably 5 or 10%, less than 10% in this specific area where we're doing our first pilot project, use the river or use a bad water source. And some of that's simply convenience, where they don't want to walk as far. But a lot of it is, I've actually seen, so close to where we're doing our demonstration site, we'll go and get water and you pay 5 cents and you're able to refill maybe a 5 or 10 gallon jug. So there are communities, the water access in these specific communities are slightly better. That said, in other parts of Sierra Leone, it's much worse. In other places in Ghana, it's much worse. In Ghana, there's quite a few organizations are doing water. A couple of my best friends who are Americans living over there are doing water as well. And it's definitely a need. It's not as pressing as in other areas where we're working right now.
Doing water, are they buying it, selling it?
So yeah, a lot of people, they love to drink out of like sachets. So a lot of the times when I'm living over there, I'll just drink out of little plastic sachets that are half a liter. And a lot of people will sell that. You can buy it almost anywhere. And you'll get a big bag that's filled with maybe 25 or 30 water sachets, and that's your drinking water. And usually it's clean. Occasionally you hear stories of it being infected, but overall it's pretty good. So yeah, water is, it's a rapidly changing place, and there's been a lot of changes in the availability of clean water in the past 2 decades over there. It's still not where they'd like it to be, but it's moving in that direction.
Well, what about wells? Are the wells able to be built? All right.
Yeah, so like for example, the site where we're doing the Innovation Hub, sort of our neighbors, there's a small agriculture project and they drilled for wells and it took like 3 or 4 tries before they got it. So a lot of the times, well, not a lot, sometimes you'll have projects where they think they have the well and then it's not actually there, or it is. So there are still some areas where it's a struggle to get water, but overall it's drastically improved from where it's been.
When you talk about entrepreneurship, you talk about farming.
Yeah.
What other entrepreneurial opportunities are there over there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the ways, so in some ways you can be like a factor-driven entrepreneur where you're just looking to do what other people are doing already and do it better, like going into chicken farming. So there's demand for chicken, there's demand for eggs, and so there's demand for livestock, both in household and externally. So that's some of the opportunity. Some of it is, there's an organization that we're sort of working with a little bit called Moringa Connect, and they focus on growing the moringa tree and getting farmers to grow moringa, and then they buy it and they help market it in the US. So one of the differences with them is they created a brand, and they've created a brand that's reliable, that has Western markets, that has Ghanaian markets, that people are willing to pay for. So often the challenge is not so much just getting people to grow moringa, but getting other people to pay for it. So it's always finding the market opportunities, but also what's feasible. In our area, pineapple is a big, and papaya is a big opportunity where there are a number of large buyers who will buy and process and ship to Europe. So there's opportunities there. So there's opportunities to sort of improve on existing practices and start your own farm. There's also opportunities for processing agriculture. Post-harvest loss is a huge challenge really in the world, but especially in West Africa, where some areas are losing 40% after they harvest it. If you look at mangoes, it's astronomical. It's way, way over 50% the amount of mangoes that are just wasted simply because they all come at once and there's no way to process them. So there's opportunity with drying fruit, selling fruit. That said, it's much easier to say there's opportunities and it's much harder to actually make it happen. But I've seen entrepreneurs who are really, really determined. They've done things with shea butter. They've done things with moringa. I've seen one guy, he is really good at cabbages. He has a passion for cabbages and has about 20 cabbages, and he started off with just a couple acres, not even that. And he's really grown, and he just works really hard, manages well, and he's a successful entrepreneur. And he's really changing that perception that agriculture is a poor man's default, that it's not for someone who wants to make money.
Peter,
Yeah.
question for you. The meeting slide that you had where we're discussing the finances.
Yeah.
Since I think most of us can agree that finance is at the heart of opportunity, I'm interested in learning, number one, did Just Hope and you instigate these meetings? And if so, how is it that at the board of directors you have 50% female and 50% male, which is unlike most of us here in the Western world?
So we instigated, this is our group that we've set up. It is, we try to encourage women participation, and in this area in Ghana, actually women are respected relative to a lot of other areas farther to the north where you have more sort of Muslim ingrained influences in the culture. So in a way we encourage it and they self-select. So this is all driven by them. We encourage them to have female participation, and we look to have female participation because we believe women are going to be critical to the leadership of Africa, that women are going to, they play a big difference in sending the kids to school and affecting the future generations. But really it starts with the people there, and we can encourage it, but at the same time, we aren't writing the Constitution, but we encourage it in our groups.
So did you start this?
We started this group. So they're near Barakusu, which is near in the eastern region, and so this is just a group of farmers.
We're up against 7 o'clock. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Would you take a moment and, talking about Just Hope overall, compare us to an aircraft carrier?
It's a stolen line. It comes back to what we believe about people. As Peter said, they already have an initiative. The engine is already running. They're on an aircraft carrier, and they're capable of flying. They're capable of a certain power of their own. But a healthy and well-planned execution of an interaction with them can serve as the catapult that shoots that airplane off of the deck. If the engine is not running, and we're there really giving 100%, and Peter's working hard and his team's working hard, but that individual's motor is not running, it'll just go right into the water. And so a lot of our work and Peter's work is spent on the front end trying to identify and qualify who is serious, whose engine is already running, that we are simply coming alongside to assist, remove a barrier, additional resources they don't have access to. So it's recognizing that we're, as Peter has said, a facilitator, and that's exactly the parallel I would draw to the aircraft carrier.
I think we had one more question in the back.
How do they get the land? Are they purchasing
The
that?
land.
And if so, who are they purchasing it for, and where do they get the money
Yeah.
to purchase the land?
So land is a complicated issue there, as it is in many parts of the world. In this area in Ghana, so probably a lot of the farmers simply, they'll go and they'll pay rent on an acre for maybe a year or something. They'll rent it from someone. A lot of them will just squat and just start farming. Some of them have been farming it for 10 years, but as there's this sort of creep of urbanization, their security, their land security becomes an issue. So yeah, that's a challenge. Like most things, I don't have all the answers, but it's something too where we want to encourage farmers to be able to, like, we think like if you're able to grow, if you're able to be more productive on smaller land, on land that's available, you're able to pay for it, it helps the situation. And we aren't specifically focusing on land issues but it's a reality that we have to navigate. And not us, the farmers, really. It's a challenge.
The lady that's walking 2 hours, is there not an area closer to her land that she could actually contact?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a lot of people, it's hard to find something close to you, or that's where you knew someone who was willing to let you use it, and she has to walk a long way.
The lady we visited
Yeah.
with, she had a plot, and some folks with considerable amount of resources came in and purchased that plot or had some influence, and so she's really working on a secondary location. And it's 2 miles, and as the
It takes
story
a long
would go,
time.
There's elevation. It's a significant impact, but she had it sort of, that's one of those shocks where the apple cart's been upset, and now plan B, that engine's still running hard. Plan B is, all right, I'm going 2 miles down the road because I've got to support my family. We're thankful for your attendance tonight. We're thankful for your ongoing support of prayer, money, volunteer advice. We need it. Peter, we're very thankful for you. We're thankful for your commitment and sacrifice, and I trust that everybody hearing from you tonight is pulling for you as we are pulling for the people that we serve collectively. And we thank you for just sort of opening up, sharing from the heart tonight, and we're just very appreciative.
Thank you.